about .NET a little bit today. I'm kind of comparing it to GitLab potentially. Um, so do you want to give me that intro that you just kind of gave a minute ago? Or?
Yeah, sure. Basically, I've recently been tasked introducing authorization and authentication. Well, authentication, not really, but authorization on one of our .NET backends. And since I didn't really know where to start, I looked at some documentation. Since we were using ASP.NET Core with the identity framework, we did have something to start from.
Yeah.
And I had a look at their documentation and come up with a few ideas that I tried to adapt in order to make it more look like what GitLab does for
Okay.
with permissions and policies on models, because I really like the way they do it because it's
Mhm.
really flexible. And yeah, I'm basically wanted to show you and everyone watching, if they're watching, what I did, and pretty much have feedback on that if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to have a bit of a look round for some examples of what we've done. I know the problem we find is that we're a small team and technology moves forward so fast.
Yeah.
So we're probably doing it in like .NET framework in one or two projects, and then all of a sudden it is .NET Core, and we did it in like one project, and then it changes again, and so it's trying to find whether there's any kind of standard. Um,
Yeah, well, there is some kind of standard, I think, because there's documentation, but that's kind of like a baseline that you can build on top of that.
yeah. So I'm just trying to have a quick look.
Yeah.
What, if anything, I'm sure I had something, but I'm trying to remember where you set it up. Is it in the global ASX filter config? Register all areas. No, there's something somewhere, because I know that we've got some projects that work on a default anonymous access and some that work on the opposite.
Yeah.
So there's some that most of it's anonymous, but then there's a few areas where you need to be sort of authenticated or have certain permissions.
Yeah.
And then there's other ones on the flip side. I thought I'd found one, but I'm trying to remember where. I thought it was the global ASAX, but it doesn't seem to be. This, I guess, is not a .NET Core one. I think we might be using a bit more custom filters, which again I can't actually find. Into extensions, authorize permission attribute. Yeah, so let me. I hope I'm not gonna share anything that I should. Excuse me. Right, let's try sharing that screen. Like I say, this is just one example, so it may be completely different to what you've done. Like I say, this is probably .NET Framework as well, not .NET Core.
Yes.
So this is kind of overriding, I guess, using some kind of authorized permission attribute. So I think that then I probably won't be able to find it now. Right. So can you see what it does? You can see that it's got a property of permission ID. And then it checks whether the current user
Yeah.
permissions contain that. So it's reasonably straightforward. Yeah, there you go. So then on each controller, so I quite liked this mechanic, if you know what I mean, whether or
Yeah.
not. So I guess this is quite straightforward, where I think we've probably got each user has one or more roles, each role has one or more permissions, and then when you log into the system, there's some kind of cache session, whatever, that stores a list of those permissions. And then
Yeah.
each time we're just using that kind of authorize, whatever it's called, extension, to kind of handle, to do this, you need to be able to manage users. In fact, all of these are the same, which probably means we could have put it at the controller level rather than the method level. Maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, that's a kind of simple way. But then we've also, I'm going to unshare that and get you to share what you've got in mind or what you've been playing with. I don't know how different that is. It probably, to be honest, doesn't make any difference. But then with another of our systems, we started to try and use. So this project I was sharing there is, I'm going to call it homegrown. It probably is using, is it Owen or something like that? It's called the kind of .NET authentication out of the box thing. I think the library is called Owen, but we've got a table that's got users and encrypted or hashed password, salts, etc. But we've tried to go more down the route of using single sign-on with Azure Active Directory. Although we've had fun and games with a lot of cookie issues with that more recently. But we're slowly getting rid of some of those bespoke systems anyway, so I haven't tried to stress too much. But yeah, show me what you've kind of got in mind or what you've been throwing together.
Yeah, we had something similar to what you used with the authorize attribute.
Yep.
We used the built-in authorize attribute where you can pass, for example, authorize role and specify one role.
Right.
The only problem with that is that we wanted to have dynamic roles because the users can define their roles and give permission to their roles.
Yep.
And the other thing is that by authorizing with a simple check, for example, the current user has this permission or not. But how would you handle something like, for example, what we do on GitLab on MR threads? For example, only the author or someone with developer role can resolve the thread. So there's a more
complex, essentially.
Yeah. Exactly. That's not just you have the permission or not. You have something more that you have to check.
So there's immediately I'm thinking chicken and egg. That if you've got a controller method to, let's say it's viewing an issue in GitLab, and it's a confidential issue, you kind of need to load the issue first to find out that it's confidential and to get the author and to then be able to do the kind of checks that you want to do.
Yeah, and that's basically what also GitLab does, because if you don't have the entity to check, you can't check those kinds of permissions. So based on that, I searched the documentation and I found that, well, it's not that hard to find, but ASP.NET Core authorization has both the role-based authentication and policy-based authentications.
Cool. Okay.
So with policy-based authentication, you can build these custom checks and more complicated checks, because you can inside a policy you can both check if the user has permissions, but you also have the resource that you want to check the permission against. So for example, the example of before, if you are the author or if you have the permission to mark MR thread as resolved. The only downside of that is that I found it quite complicated. No, well, not complicated, but there's a lot of boilerplate code to write even just one policy.
Right.
So I come up with a few ideas, and I'm going to share my screen because that's nothing secret in there.
It's interesting that boilerplate code isn't part of like the library, the NuGet package or whatever it is that you're sort of leveraging to.
Yeah, that's actually what I thought when I saw how we have to create those custom policies, because keep in mind that I didn't know anything about this before starting, so maybe
maybe they exist, but we just yeah,
exactly. So let me share my screen. So basically what I found is that oh yeah, there's lots of error because I just checked out this repository.
I might need you to just zoom it up a tiny little bit in a minute.
Yeah, I'm just restoring.
I can possibly do a F11 actually. If I make you full screen, I might just about be able to. I'm just showing I don't know how to use the Mac. How do I do F11?
Oh, you don't do F11.
Oh no, of course not. Oh god. You got. Full screen. No, that helped not at all.
You should also have the F to enter full screen on
That looks like it, yeah, function key and F or something it says, but fortunately it's the sidebars that are squidging you in, so it's fine. I can make that out. So, right, okay.
Okay, so basically to define a custom policy, you basically have two options. You have to derive from an authorization handler,
Yep.
or well, the name is the same. The only difference is that these are generic. This authorization handler is generic, and this one instead is tied to a resource type.
Okay.
And you have to write this handler requirement async, where inside that you basically have the HTTP context, the resource, and you basically do the checks for permissions, or for example, checking that the author of the resource is the same that's making the API request.
Cool.
And you should create many of those for each policy. And
so,
I find rather
yeah. So yeah, each policy would have a number of, so it'd be like read, issue, update, issue, add note, whatever. Would all of those would be
exactly. And the other thing that you have to do for each one of these policies is you have to register the authorization handler.
Yeah.
So you have to derive an authorization handler for each policy, and you have to add the singleton to that handler. And you also have to register a name. For example, in GitLab, we have the admin issue as a policy, for example.
Yeah.
And that's the name. And you have to specify what's handling that permission. So you have the ID and the way to check whether or not that permission is available or not.
Mm-hmm.
And manually doing all of that is rather
yeah, you'd expect that to be in a library, right?
Yeah,
it
exactly.
Says load all the policies.
Exactly. So what I actually came up with is something like we have on GitLab, where I basically define this base policy.
Yep.
Which is a class that inside of it declares the two type of handlers, the generic one and the resource based one.
Yep.
And you can, and I exposed a couple of methods to build operations. What I mean with operation is, for example, the admonition. The admonition is an operation because you want to admin the issue, and inside that you check whether or not you can do it or not.
Yeah.
So, for example, this is the user policy based derived from the base policy, which is handling the user model. And in here, I declare all the operations that I want to be able to check if the current user can do or not.
Perfect.
And inside it here, I have all the information about the user making the request, because I have the HTTP context with all the user claims that we use to provide, for example, the permissions. And you also have, in this case, because this is a resource-based operation, you have also the resource that you are checking against it. And I don't know if you ever used it, but this context is the authorization context from ASP.NET Core authorization.
Okay.
And that's basically the same as enable or disable on...
Makes sense.
Yeah, because you can succeed any number of times, but I don't know if for example, in here, if you have at least one fail, that operation, you basically can't do it. And I also introduced this policy for resource attribute that I use to gather all the policies that are declared inside the assembly to basically push those inside the authorization handler singleton, so that we register all the handlers. And also I automatically build all the policies, because the name is basically derived from the name of the operation. So you have for example, user policy read user. You have a policy that's user dot read user, or user dot read all users.
Yep.
And that maps to the where is it, to this function in here. That's the actual one that's checking whether or not you can do that operation or not. So all that boilerplate to declare the handlers and all of those things went down to basically declaring a policy and a list of operations on that policy.
Yeah.
And also this way, because one thing is checking whether or not you can do this operation on the backend, but we also wanted to expose these permissions of operations on the front end to enable, disable sections of the front end. And that's also quite easy, because I exposed this controller that basically gets all the generic operations and runs the check on that policy, and returns basically a JSON with name of the policy and true or false if the user can or cannot do it.
And that's just the generic ones, not the resource-based ones.
Exactly, because the resource-based ones, you have to, for example, when you fetch the users, you have to check if
each
operation for each user.
Cool. Yep.
And this is basically it. Oh, the other difference between the authorize attribute does on the control level, I wanted to make it, let me find it. Yeah, for example, all of these controller endpoints have the only the authorized key attribute, because they can only be called by an authenticated user. But whether or not the user can use the endpoint is done at the service level.
Right.
So the service can use. Let me find it. For example, the user service.
So you have to pass your context into the service, do you? Or
no, I actually found that we can get that context from the service using dependency injection.
Okay, yeah.
I basically created a base service that's exposing. Here I get the HTTP context. I found this on the Microsoft documentation, so that's working. So I guess
Cool.
that's working. And I basically define this authorized operation, or can. I use the same name on GitLab.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Basically, the authorized operation checks whether or not the provided operation can be performed and throws an exception. So even from the services, you can throw exceptions, and you can block someone giving a 403 unauthorized message. So you don't have to handle that at the controller level. And
so there's some error handling that you had to write in the controller to know that if you throw a certain exception to sort of convert that to a 403, or
I didn't do it at the controller level. I actually did it at the application level.
Okay.
So we don't have to do it on every controller. We can just throw the exception, and in here I have the handle for all 100 exceptions, and I'm checking.
Perfect. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's spot on.
Yeah. And for example, and those those methods are, for example, the authorized operation or the can are available both at service level and the controller level, so you can use them on both sides. And that seems to work pretty well. So it's not really like GitLab does it, but it's kind of there. Do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I think it looks really nice. I definitely I'm nowhere in a position to sort of say, oh, like there's a better way to do it, or I would do this differently. Like, I think for me, it would definitely be a Stack Overflow job to kind of say, look, these are like, if you could maybe copy your base service, your startup.cs, well, all the bits of the puzzle that you've had to put in place to get this kind of architecture framework working. And sort of say, like, it seems like a lot of overhead. And is there a sort of a framework or a NuGet package that kind of does this for us? There's so many open source NuGet packages. That it's rare that you need to, and again, I've learned that the hard way from like reinventing the wheel many times. And then as I've sort of progressed, I've realized that most stuff like login, we used to have our own login framework, and then we moved over to use Log4net, and everything, there's something there somewhere. But it's just finding the right person that can point you at it. So I would probably encourage you to write a little Stack Overflow, maybe even push up a small project to GitHub with just the kind of GitLab with the kind of those base kind of components, so that you can demonstrate. I think there's probably a little bit in this project that you maybe would want to obscure, but you might be almost comfortable enough like with this. I don't know how much you'd need to strip out, or if it's easier just starting from scratch.
Oh well, this is a pretty much start of the project, so
there's nothing else in there really that's kind of too sensitive.
Yeah, well, stripping that out will be very easy.
Cool.
Yeah. Also, for example, to handle permissions, because we have the UI to create roles and assign permission to each role.
Yep.
And even to define all those permissions, I don't know if I actually didn't think about checking whether or not there's a NuGet package for that, but I used the .NET partial class.
Right.
I basically defined a class permissions with a static method using using a reflection to extract all the strings, public constant strings defined on the permissions class. So every service can define their own permission at the top.
Yeah.
Using the partial, extending the partial class. And those are the ones used on the actual policy. For example, the user policy is checking the permission user read.
Nice. No, it seems like a pretty elegant. I don't know if type safe is quite the right word, but you know what I mean. Like, and foolproof again, maybe not quite exactly the term I'm looking for, but yeah.
For example, another reason why I had to move, because I could very easily have let the authorize in here and specified the string with the name of the policy to check. But we can't pass strings in here. I mean, we can pass strings, but only constants. Right. And since the name of the operations the name of the policies are defined at compile time, basically, because they are composed by the name of the policy and the name of the operation.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to use the authorize attribute with the policy name, and that forced me to create those authorize operation methods on the base controller and the base service, which in the end, I think it's also a good thing because that's more flexible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty nice. So one of the, I don't know if it would work in this instance. I don't know, no, probably not. So one of the things, again, it wouldn't really make any difference, but you know where you've defined your strings for the permission names, for example.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of, how would I call it? So like where we've got like a settings service that we might use, or a settings model that will grab settings from app settings, to avoid like repeating strings, although you've defined the const, so you're not really repeating it anyway. But we quite often use the.
That's not technically true because let me find it. Yeah, we define the variable using the partial class, so we can't have the same variable twice, but the string can actually be there twice.
Gotcha. So I don't know exactly. I've not done it a while, but if you use a getter in there instead, or I don't know what you call it, like a lambda tree or whatever, we use name of quite a lot.
Yes.
So you can, if you use the name of the const or whatever you want to call it, then it forces it to be the same, if that makes sense.
Yes, I get what you mean. And maybe we could even
use an array and then loop through them and generate them.
Not really. I used a little trick to define the operations. Let me find the base policy. Basically, when you define an operation, you use this build operation.
Yep.
but you don't provide the name of the operation.
Right.
Because that's derived from the, let me find it. Oh yeah, build operation. I have a parameter of that function that's using color member name,
Yeah.
and that's getting the name from the variable that I'm declaring.
Cool.
And yeah, basically I'm using that converted to lower as a unique operation name.
Gotcha.
Maybe I might be able to do something similar to define the permissions. That's a nice idea to avoid having the risk of defining the same operation twice. Permission, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think why we were finding we've got like quite a common pattern where we check if a private variable is null. If it's null, we go out to the app settings or whatever and populate the private and then return it. And we were repeating the same thing 2 or 3 times, and sometimes we were using different, I don't know what we call it, like snake case or kebab case or lowercase or uppercase or whatever. So yeah, we decided to just always use name of, and like pass in the method name itself, and that just kind of makes it so you kind of can't go wrong. I guess the only thing is this wouldn't. I'm surprised that works, if I'm honest, because I didn't think that was a const, if that makes sense. But I guess it is. I guess it can build that at compile time. It doesn't need to do it at runtime.
Yeah, because that's another thing that I discovered about C# is that you can't define a static const because consts are fixed at compile time. And yeah, I thought quite hard with that, so I had to resort with static read only and const for these ones, and yeah, that was quite frustrating.
Cool. But yeah, I think it's a really nice solution. I think it's just sharing that with a bigger audience to see if anyone can sort of point us in the direction of, here's one I prepared earlier.
Yeah.
That's got a sort of community behind it. So they've already kind of not only solved the problems you've solved here, but hopefully solved the next bunch of problems that you're going to encounter when you start trying to use it.
Well, I could even translate this one to a NuGet package and make it.
Oh, absolutely. If it's not already out there, that'd be awesome. Like, yeah,
that's not a terrible idea actually, because using the power of open source, we can have other contributors fixing my errors.
Yeah, no, that's it. Like, whether you decide, I guess it's just a case of like, if you go down that route first, or if you first sort of try and share it in such a way that you can get a bit of feedback, if it's going to save you some sort of effort, if someone says, "Oh, check out this package," or these packages. But Google Foo can be one of the hardest things in the world, right? So
yeah, you're absolutely right.
But yeah, it's nice. I like it. And again, always nice to be kind of inspired and basing it on something from the GitLab code base.
Oh yeah, next thing down the line, when I have time to, is adding GraphQL and expose permission using that.
There you go. The only thing that I'm just trying to, I haven't thought about it, I'm sort of thinking out loud. So I think you've already catered for this, but the GitLab permission system's like limited at the moment to the 5 built-in roles, or however many there are. but I think you're already pulling those roles from the database, right? So
yeah, roles are completely defined by the end user.
so you haven't sort of tied yourself into that kind of limitation or whatever you want to call it. So
Yeah, we wanted to avoid that because yeah, we want to let the user define their own roles and their own permissions based on the role.
yep, yep. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll let you package it all up then.
Well, I can create an open source. Yeah, I can strip everything out and leave only the backend changes. Yeah.
I
That's
suppose one of the sort of questions or challenges that I'm not overly familiar with is how much of it. So most of it exists in the service layer. You just have to register something in the, I'm going to call it presentation layer, i.e., in the startup.
yeah.
Because I guess you want to make this as agnostic or whatever the term is as possible, right? So, how would this present itself? Or could it be used if it was a WinForms app or a console app or anything else?
I don't think so because that's tied to the ASP.NET authentication context and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so there'd have to be a kind of a console or WinForms or whatever equivalent of that can interpret the result.succeed or result.fail that you're using, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I actually could make if let me think.
I don't think that's a big problem. Oh, sorry. Yeah, first iteration even or whatever could be coupled to ASP.NET, or I lose track of the names of all the technologies, but
Yeah, but in the end, the only things that are, let me show you, the only things that are actually tied to the ASP.NET authorization is this base class authorization handler and the authorization handler context. But
yeah,
I could make these three parameter, a template parameter of the base policy.
yeah,
And so you can provide authorization handler, and these other one, and the authorization context from ASP.NET Core when you are using ASP.NET authorization.
yeah,
Yeah, because for example, this is not tied to the entity framework.
no,
This is not tied to that. Yeah, that might actually be doable.
Again, they're just kind of ideas. I guess you start by pushing up the bare bones so
Yeah.
you can get some feedback and understand if you've reinvented the wheel, and if not, then you sort of release an alpha version and then sort of see where you can go from there.
Well, if I reinvented the wheel, it was a nice ride.
Absolutely, it's always a good learning experience, right? To understand a bit more what's going on under the hood, and it makes you realize a lot of like why things are done in certain ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's honestly looking at the documentation on how to add the resource-based authorization and policy-based authorization. It was kind of a nightmare because you have to define all of these different bits and pieces that in the end it's when you figure out where to define things and what you have to define, that's pretty easy. It's just a lot of boilerplate code, and I might know the reason why they did this to make it as flexible as possible.
Yeah,
But yeah, I wish it would. I hope to find an existing NuGet package.
Yeah. No, I agree. It'd be awesome because I should have my slide deck prepared for sort of open source contribution, right? Which is kind of saying about the benefits that you get of working on like an upstream, and essentially you get a lot for free. Because it's already there, and what you want to add to it, you add to it. Great, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that other people have added or are adding to it. Yeah, sounds awesome. Cool.
Awesome.
Keep me posted. Yeah, always intrigued.
A nice exercise for the holidays.
What's that? Sorry, something for the holidays.
A nice exercise for the holidays.
Something a bit different, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Have you got anything in flight in the other world at the moment? Are those back end time tracking sort of tweaks moving along, or do you need anything from me on them? Or
well, I answered to a couple of questions.
Oh yeah, I think you agreed with one thing, and did you have a question on the other? Maybe we take that opportunity just quickly to just move that along while we've got a few minutes, although like my brain probably won't survive much longer. But right, let me GitLab.
Yeah, other than that, I think I will move on the reporting and actually adding the UI to set the estimate, because that got kind of lost adding the time entry model.
Yes. Right. So what was I saying? Yeah, I think I was trying to understand with this.
The comment is actually on the let args at the end.
Yeah. So what I was trying to understand, it might be better in the full context. So first, I probably want to look at it would be the resolver itself, I think. So what we're saying is, because this argument has a default value, it's always populated, right?
Yeah.
But that, I presume, happens before it's passed in to resolve with lookaheads, right?
Yeah.
So in our spec, again, I'm probably completely misreading this, but let's have a look. So in our spec, time resolver spec, when we sorry, okay, that's extra. No, it wasn't that one, was it? Or was it? It's vanished now. Let's have a look. No, yeah. So this one, this can never happen is kind of what I think I was suggesting, or have I misunderstood that?
Yeah, basically yes. You can't have empty arguments because there's at least this sort of argument provided by the resolver itself.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was. So I can't remember. It probably wouldn't, but somewhere where we maybe had a .any check. So let me try and find.
Yeah, that's on the resolver.
This one here.
Yeah.
So if we go back to here.
Yeah, that any was a leftover. I actually removed it. I need to have the changes.
So we've got no else, which is why the code coverage doesn't actually help us here. So what I was kind of expecting is, let me just have a look. So the if is hit 60 times, and that's hit 60 times. So that should sort of be a red flag. And I'm actually surprised that the GitLab code coverage, code quality, whatever it is, doesn't actually identify and say, hang on a minute, every single evaluation of this evaluates to true.
Basically, yes.
That would be pretty cool, right?
Yeah. In fact, Yeah, that's true, but the check is done inside. Where is it done? Validate args at the top. That's checking if the user actually provided an argument.
Yeah. But all I'm getting at, like, I think you know exactly what I'm getting at, because I think you've agreed that essentially we need to remove this now because,
Oh, yeah. That doesn't make sense because that's always going to be true.
or we were going to change it potentially to be something like args.delete, like to delete the sort arg, or args.accept sort.any, or something along those lines, I guess.
Yes, but that's already done at the validate args level, because if you don't provide any other argument.
Well, no, because if you've got an object, then we don't need args. Well, what am I saying? I don't know what I'm saying now. All I mean, like, so essentially, if there's no args, so this probably needs to be moved outside of the if. But if there's no args, there's no point in going into all of these methods, even though they've probably got guard clauses in them all.
Yeah.
It's again, it's arguable. You might just say, well, like, nesting is evil, increases the code complexity. Let's just get rid of the if altogether and keep all these conditions, or whatever you want to call them, in the code. I'm fine with that. But at the moment, this if will always return true. So every single one of these lines of code will always execute. That's the only kind of point that I'm making. And it's just weighing up whether, like I say, this should almost certainly be moved outside. And then this, we could change the logic a little bit if we wanted, or we could just do away with the if and just always do all this.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah. But you know, it's a tiny, it's a trivial little thing. Like, it's not going to break anything. It just like, yeah, when I looked at it, like the logic, I think you even called it out somehow. I can't remember exactly how, but you said something that made me think, oh, hang on a minute, like, you can't actually have no args, so that's not a valid.
Oh yeah, that's a comment I added to the validate args.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So I think you probably want to maybe push up like a tiny little tweak to this, I guess. Like, but it's pretty much still ready for review, right?
Yeah, that's actually, it got all the approvals. I don't know why that's not showing there, but it was just missing the final push because the master was broken.
Ashraf.
Maybe
it's when if you've pushed
I
chain.
did push something up, and yeah, I need to ping. Maybe I did ping James.
So resolved all threads. Yeah, so it was approved, but then subsequently.
Yeah, because I was having a failing spec, so I suppose I fixed it and the approval got removed.
Exactly. Yeah, awesome. So that was the one. What about the other one? Do I need to look at that one quickly as well?
Or? No, well,
two,
they're basically the same. If I don't remove, well, I guess we can just remove the if, because yeah, that should be good. Even if we try to apply the checks, the filters, they have a check whether or not the argument of the filter is actually there or not. So we could remove the if and just leave it as it is.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. But yeah, it'd be awesome to get this merged, because then we can move along that the actual report. What's that? Sorry?
I have the other one ready to add the counting and total time.
Right, yeah, that's the other one that I had in mind. So have you pushed that yet, or you've got to really wait until you've pushed it?
No, I did push it, but it's still in draft because it's going to have a conflict. So I'm waiting for this one to get merged.
I think there'll be a mass holiday exodus soon. So let's hope.
It might be.
Awesome. Cool. Anything else before we disappear, Marco?
I don't think so.
Wicked. So what next week will be the 27th? So I am probably not going to be about. I don't know if you're intending on working, but we might be 2 weeks until we see each other again. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
face to face.
Yeah. I don't know, because we have Christmas on Sunday. We have, I don't know. I am at home. Oh no, maybe I'm actually at work the 27th.
Excuse me. Oh well, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. Well, if I'm at work, I can do a pairing session even by myself.
Okay, no worries. Awesome.
No.
Great day, Marco.
Okay.
See you later. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.